We'd like to welcome you to the virtual kitchen table. We are Haley from Taking a Kinder Path, Ashley from Ashley as Mama and Storytime Shelves, and myself, Erin, from Everlearning. We're gathering to have conversations about family life and home education, most specifically unschooling, which is sometimes known as self-directed education, or as I often refer to it, whole life learning. We'll be sharing experiences and ideas, learning as we go. We hope you'll pull a chair up to the table and join us. Hi, Haley. Hi, Ashley.
Hello.
Hello.
How is everybody today?
Good, thank you.
Yep, very good. Yep.
Good. Excellent. We're kind of midsummer, I guess, depending on how you look at it. I know different places have a different idea of summer holidays, but here in Canada, it's pretty much the month of July and August. So we're kind of getting to that halfway point of what would be considered summer holidays. What about you, Haley? What are the kind of the big
in the UK, the summer holidays are just about to start. So a lot of our home ed activities, we kind of had the last session this week of forest school and swimming and stuff like that. So I think most of the schools will break up at the end of this week or the end of next week, maybe.
Oh, that's so interesting. So then when do the kids go back to school?
Normally the first or the second week of September.
Okay, so you have a shorter number of weeks then. Okay.
Yeah, it's about 6 weeks, I think, normally. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And then I think in the US, it's almost like they're almost ready to go back in August, I think, in lots of places. So it's
yeah. Well, actually, I say the UK. Scotland, actually, they break up before us. So I think in Scotland they've been broken up for a while. But in England, I should say England, not the UK.
Okay. Okay. So today, I guess we are talking about aha moments with unschooling, and I had jotted a few things down, and then something else came to me just as I was sort of getting ready to log on here today. So maybe I'll just start with that. And it's something I hadn't actually thought about before, but it was just the idea of time. And so my kids are older, right? So my guys are older, and then my daughter is 16. And so I think in my mind, I'm thinking, I have a picture of having a lot more time than I did when the kids were younger. And I do. I mean, in some ways I do. But I don't know. It's also surprising how quickly the time does get filled and how many things are actually still are. And they're just different. So it's not, it's not that stage of life where you're, I don't know, tying shoes and making sure kids don't, run into traffic or anything like that. But it's just different. It's a different type of time. And I wonder sometimes how that relates to unschooling, in the sense that I think for me, I'm trying to be present. I'm trying to be, just really present and respectful in whatever we're doing, and not be kind of constantly rushing off. And yes, there are realities to life, but I do find that suddenly I'll realize that things have taken longer than I thought they would. So, and again, I think it's because we're entering into conversation, not just really quickly, but really kind of diving into things. And sometimes I think too, it takes a little bit longer to figure out how we want to go about something. So just as an example, I was working alongside my daughter on some pieces today. And so she's doing some academic things. When I say academic, I mean sort of core system structure. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about that as an aha within unschooling as well later. And so within that, we're not just necessarily following along exactly. We're kind of thinking about what makes sense, what would be the best use of time, what might lead into other things. So it's a little bit more of a conversation than just strictly following, a workbook or a curriculum. And I find that does take more time. Or we'll get into a conversation I don't know, something we like to do if we're reading a book or go see a play or a movie, we like to get different versions of it. And so there was time that was spent then, looking at different library catalogs, or I guess the online website, just trying to figure out, okay, what version do they have of this? Do we want to also look at the the abridged version? Do we want to have a look at a graphic novel version of it? And not that traditional homeschoolers don't do that as well. So maybe it's not entirely an unschooling conversation, but I do think that for us, we can get really down some rabbit holes and all of a sudden the time is gone. And I thought that would happen less maybe as the kids got older, and to some degree it has, but in other ways the conversations are deeper, and they're more involved in that. And so it sometimes actually takes more time. So yeah, I think one aha for me is just time. And I think the idea that I think it's it's kind of a stereotypical idea that that people that are unschooling, that there's not really much to do, right? You're just kind of letting your kids do whatever. And I think that the vast majority of people who've looked into it probably don't believe that, but there is that thought of like, oh, this will be easy. I'll have so much time to myself. And again, it's just not, because when you get deep into people's interests and you get, I don't even know if I would call this an interest. This is something she's doing because she would like to do it. There's kind of a means to an end. But those things take time. And so, yeah, that's definitely been an aha for me. This isn't just, let's see what the day holds and I'll take lots of time for myself. There's lots to it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Erin. I think, as mine have got older, I think, those conversations go off in so many directions. Often, like you say, they can go that much deeper, I think, can't they? And it's funny because one of the ahas that I wrote down was about the fact that I think conversation is one of the most important learning tools. And so you talking about how the conversations taking up a lot of your time, that's because they are just so important, aren't they? And they're so they just take us off in so many different directions and help us to help us to think through what we're all learning and look for new directions and new questions and deepen our understanding. And it is it's an interesting idea, that unschooling might not take any time from us as parents because we're letting our children lead, which I'm sure we'll come to another aha moment about that in a minute. But yeah, that was the thing one of the things that I thought about, was how important conversation is really to learning.
Yeah, and I think that I have that too. I wrote it down in a different way, but I think that might be something so kind of across the ages, like true regardless of how old the kids are, because mine are 8 and 6, so it's pretty young, and it's not new, where I discovered, like, have one of those aha moments where I was like, so much of our time consists of these conversations, and so much of our learning comes through just having these chats. And sometimes they're not real long, other times they can be quite long, or we return to the same conversation or topic. And I kind of wrote it down in that so much of it is answering their questions. Like, it usually comes for us right now where they come up with a question. They'll just say something or they'll ask something, and once in a while I may know the answer, but more often than not, I'm like, let's go look this up. And it just starts a whole conversation. And that's been a really cool aha moment that I noticed. Not at the beginning. It took some time for me to kind of, like, we had to have enough of that happening before I was like, oh. And I might have even been when people ask, like, well, how are they learning? What does learning look like? And I was like, well, and I had to really think about it. And then thinking back, and like, a lot of it's through conversation, which I love.
Yeah. And it's that question as well of how do you know that they're learning? And kind of how do you measure that learning? And the whole thing about, do you need to test them? And you think, well, actually, if I'm with them all day and I'm having these massive, long, rambling conversations, then there isn't that need to test them, because you can see the the sort of evolution of their thinking, and you can see the variety of stuff that they're thinking about, and the kind of depth and breadth of the, you know, the kind of depth and breadth of the topics. They're not just thinking about surface level issues, they're diving down deep into interesting little aspects of things that have come to their attention. I think that's fascinating.
And that makes me think actually of a conversation that kind of started in the online community, like our stories online community, about I think it was based on the idea of quality and quantity of time. So there's that common saying, at least it's common, I've heard it several times over the years, just in general society, right? It's the quality, not the quantity of time with your child. And, you know, we were discussing that, and I was thinking about that. I think that's where, yes, of course, we want quality. We want to be thinking about quality opportunities, and we want to, have a rich life and enjoy ourselves and have memorable moments. But so many of those actually happen when we give ourselves a quantity of time. So I think, you know, when you're both talking about these conversations that come up and the richness that come up, so often they're from having common experiences together, or having had enough just sort of time, not necessarily special time, but just everyday time, that you notice things. And so it makes sense for conversation to come up. So, you know, maybe you're walking a certain route every day, or you're driving and you notice things. And so you each have that common experience, or you're reading the same book, or you're watching movies together. And so there's just this, there are these common themes that come up, and they're just so good to talk about from regular life. And then there's just stuff that kids come up with on their own that you want to have that quantity of time to discuss. So I think I was picking apart that that sort of idea a little bit. Not that we don't want quality, but I think ideally that having that margin, having just that really good quantity of time actually leads to quality. It's not really one or the other. And especially when you're talking about those conversations, they just need so much space especially for some personalities. I think we've talked about this before. Not all kids, these conversations come up while we're doing things. They don't always come up because it's Thursday night and we decide to go out for a treat together and sit down and have one-to-one time, right? That's fun too, but it's not always where those deeper moments don't always happen in that planned way.
Yeah. There was something you said, Ashley, that I really loved then about the, not that you always know, I can't remember exactly what you said, but not that you always know the answer to their questions. And that made me think of another aha moment. the whole idea of that you don't, there's this idea, some people have the idea that if you're going to home educate, then, you really ought to be a teacher, or, how can you possibly think that you're going to be able to provide your children with the kind of education that they should have, and that whole thing about the realization that you don't actually have to be an expert on everything, because none of us are experts on everything, so that's not going to happen anyway. But that whole idea of being able to learn together, and that it really is a joint effort, and that sometimes I will know, like you said, sometimes I will know the answer, and sometimes I will have some more knowledge about a topic that they're interested in. But other times it's a real joint partnership of going out and finding, maybe it's me going out and finding more information, or maybe it's us discussing, where could we find more information on this? Do we know anybody that knows more about this than we do? Do we know, and there's so much give and take in that if one, because I've got 4 children, and if one of them has, suddenly decided that they're into a certain topic, I don't know, dinosaurs, say, there'll be somebody else in the family who'll be like, oh, I saw an interesting book about that, or I saw an interesting video about that. And you kind of, we're all experts to some degree in little bits and pieces. areas of knowledge, aren't we? But the idea that we have to be an expert in everything is such a myth, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great one to talk about, actually. And you see it pop up here and there about how you don't have to be a teacher to homeschool your kids. And I'm just like, so right. Because I understand, I mean, we live in such a schooled society, right? So I understand where that idea comes from. So I'm always happy to, and I am a teacher, so I'm always happy to say, most of the time I'm looking up what they're asking because I know maybe this much about it. And the extended aha moment for me was realizing how enjoyable it is to have those opportunities to learn those things or go more in depth with them. And like you said, Haley, there's just so much that's happening there, like figuring out how to learn together, how to pass on information. It's funny because once you break it down, I'm like, there's just so many little aha moments along the way. But I think that is a really good one because I feel like so many people would relate to that. That idea that, yeah, you don't have to be an expert. I mean, teachers don't know everything. they have to go and figure it out. So yeah, that's such a good one.
I think it's a real fear, isn't it? Obviously, none of us want to let our children down. Mm-hmm. So it taps into that very real fear of, am I, and that's obviously part of a growth process as well, isn't it? Because the more we think about these things, the more hopefully we're paying attention and finding ways to improve the ways that we're able to be with our children and help them to find things out themselves. But I think there was an aha. I thought of an aha moment that wasn't mine. It was actually my children's, and I remember my eldest daughters, both of them, saying at different points, this idea that adults actually haven't got it all figured out, and they kind of got to a certain point and thought, oh, it's okay really, because all these amazing, and it was a very nice thing. They were thinking about, amazing adults that are in their lives. Oh, actually, they haven't got it all figured out, have they? And that this process of there isn't an overnight thing that happens where you go from being a child to being an adult and suddenly now you've got it all figured out and you're sorted. And I think that, for children, or for any of us, that's obviously very reassuring, isn't it? That we're not, that we're not the only ones who don't have everything figured out, and that it's a continual learning process.
I'm laughing so much because it wasn't that long ago where my boys asked me a question. I don't know what they asked me, and I said I don't know, and one of them said, "Well, let's just go ask Dad." And I was what do you mean? Like, why do you want to go ask Dad right away? Well, he always has an answer. He always knows. And then I started to pay attention and I realized that he was rarely saying, I don't know. We didn't have a whole discussion about it, so I don't know his reasoning behind. But he was definitely unintentionally giving them the impression that I know the answer. So I think maybe even as Dad, he felt, I got to give them something. Whereas I kind of was taking the path of just, if I don't know, or I don't know all of it, I just communicate that. So it was a really interesting observation where we had a little chat about it all together. And we're like, Dad doesn't know everything. Dad needs to go learn some stuff or look things up as well. And he didn't even realize it wasn't even something he had noticed. So it was just kind of funny. But they had, both my boys were like, we'll just go ask Dad because he always knows the answer.
That's kind of funny because we've had that here too, that very same dynamic actually. The same thing. We'll ask Dad, he always knows. And it's funny, it makes me think about is that the impression that kids often get in school, or any kind of lessons, not just school. And I can even think of times for myself where I've had to consciously let go of that. Like my go-to would be to figure out the answer quickly, because I think in school it wasn't that safe not to know the answer really. So I think that's sort of ingrained in us, maybe, that somebody asks us something and quick think, what's the answer? And I think over time it's been fun to shift from just being more conscious about it. So not being in that place where it's a little bit frightening not to know the answer, even with your own children. to kind of being excited when you don't know the answer, because then you're going to get to find out, and or find out whatever piece of it, even a little piece of it. So yeah, I could definitely see we've had that dynamic here. And even, I would say, even with a lot of deschooling, I've had that myself, where I'll kind of catch myself and be like, why do I have the need to let on to the kids that I know, X, Y, and Z, because really I don't know that much about it. So that's a good one.
But I think that I mean, that's deeply ingrained in us from, I went to school, and I think both of you two went to school, didn't you? And I think that is the thing about school, isn't it? That it's not very safe sometimes not to know. It feels, there was another aha that I was thinking about, which was the benefits of making mistakes. And when I was thinking about that, I was thinking about the fact that that's one of the things that in school, it can be quite difficult to make mistakes. Nobody wants to make mistakes and be pointed out, and there's lots of people have a lot of feelings of shame from experiences they remember from school where they had made a mistake, or where they didn't know the answer, and it was embarrassing. And I think that's deeply ingrained in us, probably, isn't it, that we don't want to go back there to that idea of not, of getting it wrong.
Yeah, well, and even like, yes, because there's sort of the embarrassment factor potentially in class, but actually potentially whether you move forward a grade, or whether you get through a certain, pass a certain subject, it's all based on being right. Like it really is all based on being right. So yeah, you can see how that's really develops in us over time, that looking to be right. So yeah, it's humbling. I think it's humbling to make a shift away from that, but it's also it's very freeing when you realize that you don't need to know not need to know anything, but you don't need to know everything. And it's like that feeling. I kind of have this image, when we would go to a museum or just a new place of some kind that none of us had been to before. And maybe I would have a little bit of background, of whatever, the science or the history or whatever it was that we were exploring. But it's that feeling of like, starting your day there, and you don't know what's going to come up, and you don't know what you're going to learn. And potentially there's so much to discover, and you're kind of all starting at the same place. So I can think of a lot of times like that with my kids, where we've gone into a museum, and it's kind of an exciting feeling of, what are we going to discover today? And, we'll be going home with new things that we didn't have on the way there. Instead of kind of really, I don't know what the word is, but going in with an expert perspective that these are the points that I want my kids to know by the end of the day. And I don't think that means, here's another aha, things just keep coming up here as we're chatting. Something that I've always found useful is if we were going to, let's say we were traveling, or we were going to a museum, or we were going to, I don't know, a live play, anything. I have always found it useful to give it some context ahead of time, especially something like a live play. Sometimes things can happen pretty quickly, and kids will get more out of it if they have some context. So I don't think that unschooling means never preparing ahead of time and never kind of bringing forward information, because I've always done that. Not for the purpose of testing them, but because I think they're going to get more out of it. If we're going to a live performance, and I know it's going to be fast moving, and there might be some context that is assumed that you would know ahead of time. Well, I want to talk about that ahead of time, so that they're able to enjoy it and get more out of it that way. So that is something that we've done quite a bit of. I'm just even thinking of times where, if it's quite a popular play or something like that, and I know there's a movie version, well, we might watch the movie ahead of time, so that it can kind of be a little bit more relaxed when we're going to the live play. You can't be talking in the middle of a live play, but we can chat a little bit if it's something that's, or if the content is maybe a little much for one of the younger kids, you can bridge that a little bit, I think, by providing that context. So yeah, I don't think that it means just being totally whatever comes our way, although that's fun too. But it's just, I think it's just being really mindful about what's going to make sense for each child heading into a particular experience.
Yeah, I think you're totally right, Erin. And I know you're just reminding me of, I went to see some professional tennis recently with my two eldest daughters, and I haven't really. I used to watch Wimbledon years ago, but I haven't really watched it very much. But my eldest daughter's really into tennis, so she bought tickets for me and my other daughter to go with her, and she did just. She didn't need to prepare because she's preparing all the time with her love of tennis, but she did very much kind of cue us in to what was happening and who the players were and what the possible implications might be of the results of the match, and just nice little sort of tidbits of information that would help us to understand what was going on, and that was just like you were saying, really. She was doing that for us, and I think that aha realization that unschooling is so much a partnership, and it's not all our responsibility to bring everything to our children, but that but there's very much a process of discovery, like you were saying, and that it is also a two-way process, and there's lots of things that we learn from them if we're willing to be open to that idea. If we're not stuck and entrenched in that idea that we've got to know everything, and that's kind of a one-way street. We teach them, and whereas in actual fact that's not really what happens, is it? What happens is we're all learning all the time, and I love what you say about how it is really helpful to have some context, and it is really helpful for us to bring information that's going to enhance their enjoyment and their understanding, and it's also really cool when they do that for us too.
yeah that's so true, because I'm thinking about situations that happens here too, before certain sports or video games or whatever. Like, I'm thinking with sports even, just giving the background on who might be recovering from an injury, or what, I don't know, like what the expectations are between two teams, and some background behind that. It does help you experience things much differently. So yeah, like I'm thinking when my kids give me that information about the background before an NBA game or something like that, I do enjoy it differently, because now I know some individual things about some different players, and I'm looking at things a bit differently, knowing that somebody's just healing from an injury and things are kind of, up and down, or kind of knowing who's the underdog and having some background to that. It does help you see things. It's more interesting when you have that information and that background. And so that two-way part of it is that is just so much about it. It's just sharing life and sharing experiences, and not sharing information for the outcome of a certain learning outcome, but sharing it because you just genuinely want people to understand and enjoy something. So I think the motive is so different, probably than what we would have been used to growing up in school, I would think. So
I can think back from when I was young too, and thinking, because as you guys are talking, I think about this is all about our families coming together around something that at least one person gets a lot of joy out of, and they want to share that with people that they care about. And I remember as a child, I loved sharing with my family. I remember my next door neighbor would be visiting my mom often, and I'd want to share different things whatever I was interested in at the time. And I don't really remember specifically why. I just remember having that feeling. And I think about now, Erin, I think you just said video games, and it made me think Minecraft, because both my guys are into Minecraft right now, and they play like that, sharing of information and supporting one another as they play. The game is happening, and then I'll try to like, I'll play Minecraft with usually the older one, and it's like his chance to pass on information to me, because he's learned all about this and I haven't. It wasn't something I played before, so it's a nice opportunity for it to kind of be flipped. And that's just one example, because we certainly don't spend our days where I'm constantly passing information to them. But I do think as a kid, it can feel that way sometimes, even if we're not directly teaching them. It's what we were saying earlier, right? Like this idea that adults know everything, and we're always like trying to pass on information to help them. But it's nice when there's those opportunities, I think, for something that they're passionate about or that they have joy in, and something that they've spent more time on. Whatever it is, it could be, their love of dinosaurs, or in, my son's case, Minecraft. And I love watching him talk about it. I like Minecraft. It's something that I do enjoy doing with him, but it's not a passion of mine. I don't love the game. I love listening to him talk about it. And I think so it's just nice when you can come together and do those things. And he blows my mind with some of the stuff that he figures out. And if I wasn't taking the time to sit down and do that with him also, I could easily miss it, I think. So that was another little aha moment that I had thought about, was that time where just spending that time with them and engaging with them in all these different things, those things that you notice that you're just like, oh, I didn't know. And I'm always asking them, how do you know that? Which I've tried to stop doing that a bit, because sometimes he looks at me like, why wouldn't I know that? Like, why are you so surprised that I know this? And I obviously don't mean it to be offensive, but it just blows me away sometimes, the stuff that they share. But I really love what you guys are saying. And I look forward to, as my guys get older, that back and forth and that give and take, very much more relationship based, rather than teacher student type of learning.
Yeah, Ashley, that was actually one I had thought about, was that idea of just my surprise at how much my kids know and how skilled they are at certain things that have had nothing to do with me. I know that sound. I mean, how arrogant does that sound? But I think I think, as parents, I picture myself when my kids were young, and I just had this image of all these things I wanted to pass on to my kids in a good way, just important things from maybe like a safety perspective, but then like just the richness of life and all these different things. And I definitely think I have brought lots of different things to my kids' lives. I think we all have, but it's always amazing to me. Like it's like it hasn't worn off. They'll say something or they'll have done something, and I'll be thinking to myself, how would you know that? How did you figure that out? And it's the same thing. Sometimes I express that really outwardly. I'm like, you know about that, and they're just looking at me like, why wouldn't I? It is that same, maybe a little bit offended, like, what? Of course. But it is amazing what kids pick up along the way, both in terms of just like factual knowledge and vocabulary and concepts, and then just things that they go out and do and figure out. Like when my oldest son was leaving home, like when he was going away to college, I remember having like a checklist in my mind. I'm like, okay, there's just all these different things. And some of them were very practical, like around landlords and leases and that kind of stuff. And other stuff, I can't even remember. I think it was around, finances, and you just have all these thoughts. And like, he just didn't need the kind of help that I thought he would need. And then there are other times that my kids have needed help that I haven't thought they'd need. And that's totally fine too. It just goes to show you that we really can't end game this all the time. There's going to be areas that would be useful for them to have support in that I might not be able to predict. But there are these other areas that I'm all set to, back here planning, okay, how, what would be the best way to explain this or support this? And, the lease is a perfect example. I was trying to figure out a day that would be good for me to drive to that city to meet the landlord. And like, my son's already signed the lease, and he's found a place. They interviewed a bunch of different places. They figured it out. And it's kind of like, oh, okay. And as I said, it can work the other way too. It's not that it can't. Like, it's fine to need help with things. I don't mean it's not, but it's just those moments of like, okay, everything they know does not need to have come from me or have been facilitated by me in some way. So
yeah, I think I was, one of another aha that I thought of was the idea that how important I am, but also how unimportant I am too. Kind of like you were just saying, Erin, before about how it is important for us to bring certain things into our children's lives. We do have a role in inspiring them, and we do have more time on this earth, and perhaps areas, topics, things that we know about that they don't. And there is an important role in us, sharing things that are going to help them in their lives and things that they might be interested in. But then there's also the element that actually they are amazing learning machines, and they have so much to offer us as well. And so it's kind of like a strange balance between the fact that we do have a very important role, but then also actually maybe it's not always as significant as we imagine it ought to be, or whatever.
I can think of some times that I've read online forums, and it's probably those ones that aren't that helpful to go to as an unschooler, where people are just talking about all the dangers. And I've read conversations between people sort of saying, I don't know what so and so is going to do. Their child wants to go to school now, and they're going to be so behind, or they're interested in this career and it's never going to be a possibility because they haven't had this background. And those are the pieces that I think, unless you've been really kind of into this and into it for a while, I can understand that, because it's based on that idea that if we're not bringing things forward, and if we're not bringing forward what an expert has designed for us to bring forward, because those are almost like two different pieces, right? It's like, what are we directing? But then it's not even really us directing. it's the curriculum. Even in school, it's the teacher to a point, but the teacher's bringing material that's kind of been pre-decided for them. So there are all these layers to it. And so I think it's really hard for people to imagine how much a human being can develop as far as their knowledge and skill if they don't have kind of those pieces coming in. And I think it really does take some time and some space to really see that coming together. It's not, I've also read about or spoken to people who have said, we tried unschooling for 6 months or for a year. And I know a year sounds like a long time, but in a way it actually isn't. Like, it's really over a period of time. I think particularly in some families or with some kids that you start to see things. And I think too, some kids process things quite internally. So you aren't even necessarily knowing everything that's happening and that's developing for them. So it's a whole other way of thinking. And it's obviously a whole other level of trust as well.
Yeah, I was thinking about that invisible part, the bit about how lots of learning kind of is invisible for a while, and then it becomes visible, sometimes because of, I don't know, there's a reason for that learning to come to the forefront. But there was another thing I was thinking about as well, the kind of cyclical nature of learning, that we revisit things over and over, don't we? And the whole idea that we deepen our understanding, and that it doesn't. Sometimes sometimes we might be somebody might have a passion for something, and we're really keen to support them in that, and then they might suddenly decide that they don't want to do it anymore, and there might be a little part of us that's thinking, oh, but they didn't get everything, oh my goodness, we've missed a bit that we should have, that kind of thing, that you, I don't know, you need to know everything. And a kind of one of those ahas was that things just seem to come back round again. If they matter, then they'll come back round, and you get another chance to look at them from a different perspective or a different angle. And I don't mean, coming back to what you were saying, Erin, about the importance of us bringing things to our children, I don't just mean that we have to wait for them to come back round necessarily. Sometimes it will be a conscious thing of us asking the question, or strewing something, or talking to them about whether or not they want to explore something in more detail, or offering them a resource or something. But it is so interesting how we kind of, our learning just keeps going on, doesn't it? And you can't possibly learn everything about dinosaurs through one kind of pass, can you? You just keep, there's always more to learn, isn't there? I mean, that, that's just an aha, isn't it? There's always more.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned Dr. Peter Gray, or we've mentioned it on here like before together. And I feel maybe lucky's not the right way of putting it, but I read, what's it called? Free to Learn, right? Free to Learn. His book, kind of what I want to say early on when we started unschooling. I'm trying to remember if I even knew the term unschooling when I read the book. I must have. Well, during the book I would have. But that really helped me, solidify my beliefs around how children learn, and all of that, how we learn, how it's all natural and what it can look like. And because I just felt the timing of me reading that book was pretty good, because it gave me maybe more like the reassurance to allow that to happen. And there were still doubts, and there were still concerns about certain things, but I still always go back to that book. Like, that's the book that really helped me. And I think a part of it was because I read it at the right time. But that idea, like one of those ideas, is that we learn it when we need it, and we'll learn it the best when that's, what am I trying to say here? How do I put that? You know what I mean, though? Like, when they need it, they will learn it. And if so, we're trying to teach something because, in grade 2, you should be able to read the clock and tell time. Well, maybe that's not the case for all of them. And I use that example because that was a kind of like a schooly aha moment, where my oldest learned how to tell time pretty much himself. He got a tiny little bit of it when he was in grade 1, I think. He was introduced to the concept of time. But then he just got interested in our clocks, especially on the microwave. And maybe I've talked about this, because I know I've talked about it before in different spaces anyway. But it wasn't invisible learning. It was so obvious to us that he was, for whatever reason, I don't even know where it came from, but he just was timing things and talking about time, and no prompts from us, nothing. We were just observing. And that was like a neat little aha moment, where I was like after reading Dr. Peter Gray's book, I'm like, there it is. He just did it. That just happened. Like, this is what's going on right now. And that was kind of, I guess, on time, when he would maybe be learning it in school. But most of the time, that's not the case. It's just they will learn it when they need it. And we don't know when that will be, because it's different for all of them. And like what you were saying, Haley, about how, like, because I was kind of stuck in that maybe earlier on in the school year, trying to see more of their learning. And I had to learn more about that idea of how we come back to things, and how far they take an interest, or whatever they are spending their time on, how far they take that is the right amount for them and for that time. And they might come back to it for different reasons. Who knows when? But I had to spend, I'd say, quite a bit of time. Well, like you said, Erin, like the deschooling process. Well, there's another aha moment that's ongoing, but that continuing to read and learn about how we learn through, the books, listening to podcasts, within the community, hearing other people's experiences, that has helped a lot with all of that. Because it's unschooling is definitely not anti-learning, right? It's just allowing learning to happen, I guess, in a different way. What I would say is kind of like the natural way. But yeah, just as you guys were sharing, it made me think about that, is that we don't know when they'll know when to need it. So that book and reading it at that time just really helped push me into trusting them more and trusting that they knew. And it's not that I don't still play an important role. It's just kind of figuring out how, like, what that role looks like in the way that best supports them. That was all over the place. Sorry.
No, I think it was really interesting. And I think, well, the whole thing about invisible might not be the right word, but I suppose what I was thinking about there was that whole thing about how sometimes, you know, we know that when we have a break and then we come back to something, there's been this massive leap either in our understanding or in our skills. And it's not always from intensive practice, is it? It's often from stepping back and giving your brain a chance to kind of process it. It's a really interesting, it's really interesting how learning can happen like that sometimes, can't it? That you feel like you're sometimes you feel when you're learning something new that you're just not progressing, and then sometimes what you need is actually to step back rather than to go more intense with it. It might be that you're that taking a break is actually what you need.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't learn that until I was an adult.
Yeah.
So the thought of our kids having a chance to just that being the way, and it being okay to take that time, and that it's not wasting time, and it's actually really meaningful and has to happen. That's not school, right? Like that's not how I was learning in school. And it wasn't that long ago where I kind of figured that out. And it helps not just with learning, but I would actually say, and you could go down that whole thing, how it helps with mental health too, learning that. So that's just like another really nice thing that unschooling, I think, can allow for young people.
Yeah. This always happens. I end up with so many different things coming to mind when I listen to the different things you bring forward. So I'll see how many of them I can remember. But Ashley, when you're talking about just the reading you were doing with Dr. Peter Gray and just other, probably lots of other sources, it's so interesting to me because I think that process of, so what we're doing when we're diving deep into learning about learning, basically, right, is, that is self-directed learning. So it's this weird thing because we're reading about the very process that we're doing. And it's that moment, and I think so many people have this, not a moment, it's a period of time, and it probably cycles, where you're just so, like, you're wanting to take in so much information. I think when people first start home educating in general, or, moving along a path of unschooling, most people are wanting to take in information. And so they're learning about learning. They're learning about what things can look like for different families. And so they're self-directed learning about self-directed learning, right? And so it's funny how the amount of information and like external information that we amass, but even the amount of personal work that we do in kind of deconstructing our idea of education and learning. And it's such a huge, there's so much growth that happens with almost anybody I've met who gets involved in this, right? And yet it still takes us a while to think that same process is happening for whatever interest or interest that our child is involved in. Like it's just kind of paradoxical, really, that we're doing exactly what we're trying to talk ourselves into trusting our children doing. And yet we know how much we've learned. Like, I'm sure for you, Ashley, coming into this just in the last few years, like if you were to look at your ideas around learning and education, maybe even from 4 years ago, it's probably pretty earth-shattering.
It is. And I feel like it's a little bit overwhelming at times. So if anyone else feels that way, you're not alone, because there are days where I actually felt like I've given myself a headache from taking it all in and thinking about it. And then I realized, I need to take that break away from it. It's a lot.
Yeah, there's that rest you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's important just to process and to, And I'm just trying to think what some of those other pieces were that were popping up for me. I think it was, I can't remember what you were saying, Haley, but I remember it popping up when you were talking and it was somehow related. I think a big aha for me, probably maybe the biggest, has been the idea, and I feel like this is a controversial thing to say, that what they learn and what's happening in their minds and what level they are at is really technically not my business. And I think that is, that's huge, because definitely we talk about the fact that when we spend lots of time with our children, we can see what's over time. We can see their development. We can see their skills and their knowledge. And that is all very true. And I think it's very handy, especially if you're living in an area that you have to report and, provide evidence of learning and all that kind of stuff. But if you take that out of it, it really is odd that we pick away at a child's intellectual level, or, and I think I've said this before, maybe I can't remember if it was one of our conversations. We don't do that. We have a general idea of our child's physical growth, or, maybe their spiritual growth or their spiritual interests, or where they're at emotionally. And we certainly try to support them in those areas if we can, but we don't test them on it. We don't look at evidence, there's no sense of like, I don't know. We don't feel the need to provide evidence that they're getting taller, or they're going through puberty, or they're, having a development of faith or spirituality. Like, we might see that, but nobody's graded on that. Nobody's, so this whole idea that our society is in kids' minds all the time, testing them. It's actually kind of gross. I don't know how else to put it, but it's weird. We don't do that. And we don't do that with people of other ages. Like, we don't do that. So there's all kinds of stuff that you guys might be knowledgeable about that I'm not, but I can safely have a conversation with you. You're not sitting there, oh, Erin just demonstrated evidence that she partially knows, whatever. Like, there's none of that. And I think even within homeschooling or unschooling, it wouldn't be that we would do that in such a formal way. But I do think that it was very freeing for me to move past quietly looking for the learning, to realizing that it's really not my business. And I think that was really big for me. And it was kind of initiated by the fact that like, one of my kids who produces a lot of art and just doesn't want to show the art all the time, doesn't want to show writing that's been done. And, so if we were in a situation where we had an evaluator coming, which we don't, because we don't have to report, homeschooling stuff in our province, those would be the kind of things that I would want her to show. I would want them to see her writing. I would want them to see her, art or progression or trying of new styles or whatever. And I don't have to do that. So that's really nice. But that just really, that really kind of got me thinking, like, of course she doesn't necessarily want to show me all her pieces of art. She's not drawing for me. This isn't an external activity for her. Right. So that was very freeing for me. And I still have to remind myself of it quite a lot. Because it's pretty ingrained that we should know exactly where our children are at and fit them into a level somewhere. Right. So.
Mm-hmm. I think it's asking a lot. I'm just, as you're saying that, I'm thinking some things when they are learning, they create an outcome, right? Like an art piece or a story or an essay or whatever. But a lot of the times when we're learning something, there is no end project to present. And a lot of times it's, you've spent all this energy learning this. Now I need you to spend energy putting something together to demonstrate that you've learned it. And I think, well, that's not fair. I wouldn't like it if someone expected that of me and then for them to judge me on it. So I like what you're saying a lot about that, Erin. But Haley, I think you had something you wanted to say. I jumped in.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, well, there were a few things I was thinking. There was, again, there's so many things that come up, aren't there? And it's so funny how all these things are kind of linked, like everything's related, isn't it? You think, that aha moment leads to that aha moment. And there were a few. One of the things I was thinking about was the whole, the fact that unschooling is so much more about relationships than it is a kind of homeschooling method. I think that's because what you were talking about, Erin, was about respect, really, wasn't it? And about how so much of that kind of idea of having to test and evaluate is really disrespectful, and we wouldn't be disrespectful like that to other adults, so why would we be disrespectful to children? And another thing that I was thinking about when you were talking was the whole business of a lot of this is about kind of evidence of knowing facts, I guess, or knowing, whereas some of the most important things that any of us learn in life are things about ourselves and things about relationships. And those are the things that really matter in terms of having a peaceful, kind, compassionate, nice society to live in. And I think that's one of the things that another little aha moment that I've had along the way, which is not such a nice one, but the whole idea that the more you talk to people about school, even though their first instinct might be home education, well, I'm not sure about that. Once you start talking to people about their school experience, so much of it is actually quite negative, and there's so much hurt that people are carrying around from school, and a lot of that is to do with the fact that cycling back to that whole thing about in school there's a right answer, and if you don't get the right answer, then that can have a long-lasting impact on your psyche, and you remember the impacts of that for a long time. There were so many things that you made me think of, Erin, that now my brain is exploding with all these different things that are connected to other things. But it is so that relationship, that the aha about the relationships is just so fundamental, isn't it? And the more that I've been on this unschooling journey, the more that I've realized that our relationships are really what matter, so much more than the things that perhaps are seen as so important in school. And that whole thing about school wounds as well, that not that school is the cause of all ill in the world, of course it's not. But if we had a school system that was more about meeting children's needs than it was about targets, then what an amazing impact that might have on society and how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about other people and how we relate to other people. Massive. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that absolutely, all of that. It is amazing how things connect and weave together, and one thing just leads to another. And I think I had some aha moments in regard to content, I think, around unschooling. And I mean, I think at the beginning of the conversation, I was talking about there's sort of that stereotype, which is maybe not as widely held anymore. I don't know. That unschooling is just kind of doing nothing, right? That we don't have to bring anything in, and kids will kind of do their thing, and there's not much needed on our part. And so the flip of that, I think, is the idea of large amounts of strewing or creating. So sort of, I guess I keep using the word curating in my mind, curating this learning environment, which is fun to do. I've done it. I mean, I can think of some outside events too, where, they're family events or church events or whatever, and you're kind of curating this environment that is inviting people to participate in activities, right? So I think there's a lot of value in that. But I think for me, there's been a lot of ahas actually, as far as how much of that is actually necessary, because I do think it's a little bit of a, it's a little bit of a dance. And I think we talked about this when we were talking about the idea of the rhythm of our days and kind of the flow of our days. It's sort of, to me, it's like not bringing so much in that we don't leave space for what comes up naturally. But then the flip of that is also being aware when there are moments and sort of periods of time that it would be maybe nice and good and interesting to bring some new things in. So I think one of the ahas for me is not really that I have an answer about that, but just that it's a big piece of it. I think a big piece of balancing that out of, you don't need to bring everything in. And yet sometimes you're kind of watching those moments. When would it be really interesting to bring something new in, and really detaching yourself from the outcome of whether that's gets taken up or not. So that was one piece of the content kind of end of things. The other thing was something that I think Sue Elvis had written a blog post, and I'm not going to remember the name of it, but it was something about unschooling. When Charlotte Mason is also a part of your heart, or something like that. It's the idea that you might be really interested. It doesn't have to be Charlotte Mason, but you might be interested in certain content. And you'll hear people say, well, I couldn't unschool. There's so many things I want to introduce my child to. So it's the idea that you still can introduce your child to that. I think you need to let go of the outcome of what they're interested in, how much of it they want to do. But, a lot of the things that we've done as a family, the actual content is very similar to what a classical homeschooling family might do, or what a traditional family might do, or somebody who's setting up unit studies or whatever. We've probably read many of the same books, and we played many of the same games, and, talked about lots of the same science or whatever. It's just the process is different. So it's really not about entering this world where you can't share anything. And if your child never is interested in it, they just won't find out about it. It's not that. There's so much opportunity, to bring things in. And as I said, it's really, you do need to detach from the outcome though. But my feeling is that you need to detach from that outcome anyway, even if you are a traditional schooler, because all kids are not going to be interested in all things. So they may go through the motions, but I think your outcome isn't actually that different, is maybe where I'm going with that, as far as kind of what you're in. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just think that comes back to respect again, doesn't it? And the importance of the relationship, and that your relationship matters more than, I don't know, some random target that you might have, that you want to get through 20 pages of this textbook or something by Tuesday. Yeah, there are more, there are more important things in life, and the whole thing about respect. If you have a respectful relationship, then you're not going to want to force those things to, it becomes a different dynamic, doesn't it? So the thing with the thing with trying to get people to do things that they don't really want to do is that you're inviting resistance then, aren't you? Which is obviously then going to damage the relationship. So so it's not going to work, is it really? But I think that's what the language around invitations and inspiring and stuff is so nice, because it is important, like you've said, Erin, there are things that we're able to share with our children that they might not stumble upon on their own, or they might not stumble upon it for a long time. And we want to share those things that we're enthusiastic about, and those things that we think that they're going to enjoy. But that doesn't mean that we're always right about those things. And that's our learning, isn't it? Learning that, learning to not be so attached to things, and learning that there are lots of different ways lots of different ways for people to learn, and lots of things that people can get value out of. And it doesn't have to be our idea of what is really important for them.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ashley.
No, you go ahead. I hadn't fully formed my thoughts, so please.
And I think kind of along that same line is this idea that people might have that, if kids are self-directing, self-directed learning, or however we want to talk about it, that sort of structured academics are never a part of that. And I think I'm kind of circling back to something I alluded to at the beginning, which, you know, particularly as my kids kind of came through their teen years, they were interested in pockets of academic learning. And, you know, for a couple of them, it was very practical. So it was like, I need this prerequisite to apply here or to do whatever. And so in order to do that, you know, these courses would be useful for me. And then a couple of times it has been just pure, just pure interest. And one of my kids really does like to work through things quite sequentially. They like to look at a course and divide up their time and think about, oh, okay, I'm going to do, you know, this and this 3 days a week, and I'm going to do this and this 2 days a week. And it isn't that everybody directs their learning that way, but some people do. I mean, I don't think that we need to think of all schoolish things as being unpleasant, because some kids really do have a learning style that it's quite enjoyable for them to do things in that sort of more linear or sequential way. But what I've seen is they still have the freedom to kind of choose which way works best for them, and to kind of dive off into some different areas if they want to, because I think, I mean, maybe there's a practical time limit for, you know, I don't know, people's situations are different, but a lot of times I find there's just enjoyment in studying a subject, because I think we talk a lot about how things are woven together. So, you know, if you're reading a novel, you're probably also learning some geography or history or whatever. Sure, things are woven together, but it is fun sometimes to take something like math or, I don't know, biology or something and dive into it for some people. And it can be pleasant, but I think it's pleasant when you're choosing to do it and when you can pause and do things differently if it's not working. So it really just comes back to the idea of choice and respect. It's not so much what kids are doing, it's whether they have the opportunity to choose to stop, to pace themselves differently. And what a huge life skill to be able to take a course of study and decide, you know, to understand how you learn, to look at your schedule, to look at other things you might want to do, and come up with something for yourself, versus being told there's a penalty if these sections aren't done by, you know, Tuesday the 25th or whatever. It's just it's an entirely different experience with some of the same content, potentially lots of the same content.
It makes me think how pleasant learning can be without the pressure. It's that removal of the pressure that I'm thinking from a school perspective, but even in homeschool, a well-meaning parent with good intentions and sharing something. Sometimes for my kids, especially my older one, even just putting out an invitation of some sort of play, like strewing something, there's pressure there. It's amazing how not my youngest one so much. If it interests him, he'll go over and explore it. But my other one, usually, especially if I place it on the kitchen table, he's like, and he doesn't communicate it with me, but this has taken a while for me to pick up on it. But it's just so, yeah, when there's that pressure with a curriculum, it's different if you've chosen as the learner, I want to do this. And almost like, don't talk to me about it. Don't, and that's different with every personality. But Erin, that's exactly, I was going to mention curriculum because I think that's probably an aha moment for a lot of people, is that if you unschool or you consider yourself unschoolers, that you can't use curriculum or you can't sign up for a course. So exactly what you were just talking about was what was in my mind, but I hadn't formed yet. And mine again are only 8-6. So I haven't felt a lot of pressure to introduce any curriculum. I assume as they get older, especially like high school level or secondary level, that's probably felt more. But it really isn't, to me, it's just, it kind of gets into like, what is unschooling? How do you define unschooling? For me, it always is that it's not that you don't, it's definitely not that you don't learn. And it doesn't have to mean that you don't use curriculum or that you don't sign up for a class or a course. It's more so that it's your choice. And another way I think of it is that you're not being coerced to do it. So like non-coercive learning. And that, I just lost my train of thought. But anyway, exactly what you were just talking about, Erin. I think that's probably an aha moment for a lot of families once they kind of start down that path of unschooling. That yeah, if the learner is interested in something, you sign up for that class. It's not like there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's that pressure to, you should be doing this, and if you do this, you're committed to it and you should see it through, all that pressure and stuff. That's not how I learn as an adult. So why should I expect that of my kids?
Yeah, and I think too, like you were talking about your son and maybe his radar around, strewing or something you place there. I do think some kids are do have a little bit more of or maybe a lot more reaction to that than others. They just perceive differently. And I think too, something that's been interesting when my kids have chosen to do some of these pieces that might be future, prerequisite type stuff, is that it's been a shared experience. So, and that looks different. That looks different depending on the kid and depending on the situation, but it doesn't have to be, okay, sure, you want to do this, we'll sign you up and off you go. It can be exploring together. And we've really had a lot of fun doing that, actually, exploring formal math together or exploring formal literature together, or literature formally, I guess would be a better way to say it. It's quite fun to do that in partnership. And it really is like a one-to-one learning. I mean, it's learning for me, and it's huge learning for them, I think, because they have this kind of this back and forth in this conversation. So it doesn't have to be like, oh, you're interested in this? Sure, I'll sign you up for this course. It might be, if that's all they want. But sometimes, and that's where I think this idea of gaps doesn't matter so much, because if they haven't done a lot formally in a certain area and they decide that they want to, well, then, we can partner with that. And certainly we're probably learning a ton in the process, but it doesn't kind of need to be this all or nothing thing. Yeah. So is anything else coming to anybody's mind?
All the things.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Haley.
I was just thinking about how it's all just so connected, isn't it? And we're going around in circles, and it's kind of cyclical, and that's just how learning is, isn't it? And that life is all interconnected. Go on, Ashley.
I love it, though. That's wonderful. I was just going to, I think there's one thing I wrote down, just looking at my notes now. I guess we've touched on it, but maybe I don't think we've delved into it too much. It was a big one for me, and actually, it's more so like about unschooling and how learning about maybe less of the academic things, I guess. But the aha moment for me was unschooling has allowed us to kind of simultaneously slow down, which I think I've talked about with you guys before. And there's been a lot of aha moments around what slowing down is like for us, what that allows for, what that leads to, and how we continue to, like, I think we're living pretty slowly. And I hope everyone knows what I mean when I say that, but like just our days aren't full and rushed and packed. We're just everything, like there's time. I mean, some days feel hectic, of course, but for the most part, it's a nice pace, but we still have to, I'm like, we got to slow it down more. It's surprising to me sometimes where I'm like, we got to, and I'm continually having to step back, reevaluate, look at our days, seeing what works. Like that was something where you kind of think like, oh, we figured it out. We're good now. This is what works for us. But things change. So I have to slow it back down, and I have to take that mental energy and figure out, because we don't have for us, I mean, we've talked about the daily rhythm and stuff. We don't have a structure. We don't use a curriculum. So it's almost like, feels like you're going on without a guide, right? So it's that taking the time to think about what works, what doesn't work. And even now, and it might be a little bit different, but I know some homeschool, unschool people are posting on Instagram and whatnot about who's planning right now for like the next school year. And I'm like, I'm not, but I think I am. I just don't realize it's what I'm doing. You know, maybe it looks a little bit differently. And it's not something like I can stop, think about this in the summer and we're good from September to June or whatever. It's ongoing and I do it as needed. And that took time. But once I figured that, like had that aha moment of like the value in that, it was game changing. Like that, I realized it makes sense to do this and I'm going to need to continue to do it because as we grow and seasons change, it helps to come back and look at that. But the one thing that led off of that, well, two things I'll say quickly was I discovered pretty early on that outside time became pretty important for our family, especially like days where my husband would be at work and I'd be home with the boys. And it became where we functioned better if I got us outside on a regular basis. And I think that was an aha moment for us that we just did better when we did better when we were outside and we did better when we came inside for the rest of the day if we got outside. But it allowed me mostly, they were fine, but to slow down when we were outside because when I would be in the house, there's all those distractions, the chores and the to-do lists. And, you know, I think it's a pretty slow, easygoing day, but I wasn't as present with them. And at the end of the day, I'd be like, I didn't really sit down with him that much at all or connect. Whereas we connect when we're outside. So that was a big aha moment of like, oh, it's really important. And now it's already changed. It's been about a year and that's already changed already with the amount of time we spend outside and what that looks like and everything. But for that time, that was really helpful. And we still value the outside time a lot too. But the other thing that slowing down allowed us to do that I didn't really think about before was the slowing down and having slower days and not stressing about what are they learning, what are they not learning, was focusing on, I don't want to say focusing on, but just taking the time to recognize their needs. And specifically, I thought about like their sensory needs. Now, my one guy has quite a bit around sensory needs. So that's already was on my mind because of him and how to make sure those needs are met and stuff. But it's true for all of us. Even for me, I bought my first set of earplugs maybe a month ago, and I actually haven't used them a lot, I think because I've just gone my whole life without them. But I noticed that at certain parts of the day, I would just be going like this, like, oh, everybody, you're both talking to me at the same time, or it's just too loud, or they're just loud playing. I needed to, like a sensory thing, right? So I think, again, slowing down allowed me to recognize that in myself, but also notice it even more in them and what their sensory needs are throughout the day. Or even something like hunger. Going slower and we all get hangry. We all, you know, if we go too long where we maybe didn't eat enough at lunch, so you need snack time moved up earlier and stuff. And I think a lot of families with young kids do the typical like snack at this time, lunch at this time, snack at this time, dinner at this time. I totally understand why that didn't work for us for different reasons that I won't get into. But again, because we slowed down, I was able to really pay attention and, oh, he's getting hungry, and then we have those conversations going back to that about, how does your tummy feel right now? I wonder if you're getting hungry. If we eat food, we'll have energy and then we can go do this, so that they're also learning. It's not just, oh, it's lunchtime, here's food, eat now. So I just, what I'm saying with slowing down, I feel like if, say they were in school all day and then like summer camp all day, or if we, you know, still like maybe if we homeschool, but we were very busy and structured, for me anyway, I don't think I would have noticed a lot of that stuff. I don't think or it would have taken me a lot longer maybe to figure it out. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I do feel that slowing down was a big aha for me and just allowed us to figure out that daily rhythm and what works. And because I think like we all learn more if we're feeling better, but we all do better if those normal needs are met, right? Whether it's, just making sure you're not too hungry, or like the sensory needs, and that looks different for everyone. But that was just one, actually, was like the first thing I jotted down was like, what's the aha moments for us? And I thought it had a lot to do around time, and it was a process, and it was kind of upon looking back a while ago where I was like, we've slowed down a lot, and of course we were forced to because of the pandemic. And we weren't super busy before that. Like, it really doesn't take much. And then I think also it's different for every family. Some families, what looks busy to one family might be fine for another family too. So I think that it can be quite unique from family to family as well. But figuring that out and kind of, I was surprised how much that would make such a difference.
Yeah. And I think, like, to me, what you're hitting on there too, Ashley, is just how this looks different for everybody. So, you were talking about the planning, and I think about that too, because I'll often think I'm probably not much of a planner, but I think I'm a mental planner. So I'm not a list. Like, I'm saying I'm not very good at, I'm not sure it's about being good or not. It's just not my tendency, right? To have a lot of lists around family stuff, but I do have them. It's just they're mental. So I think it's going to look so different for everybody. And even just talking about the meals, for some kids, it is really useful to have those set times. And for other kids, it is not. So I think that's a big part of it too. There's not one prescribed way to kind of live this life. So I think I only have one more little thing. Haley, do you have anything?
Well, I was just thinking how nice and neat it was that we cycled all the way back to time again, but that where we started, but also also that I just feel like that key element of the relationships was so much a part of what you were saying, Ashley, and that and what you were saying, Erin, about this looking different for everybody, because it is about the needs of the people that are in your family, the needs and the interests, and that's how unschooling works. It enables us to actually live in line with those things and try to meet those in the best way that we can, and it doesn't give us rules that mean that we might be working against those things, because obviously I think one of you just mentioned before about the whole thing of stress. Stress interferes with our learning, doesn't it, so much. I just thought it was a kind of neat thing how we came back.
That's neat. Okay. And my last little thing is maybe a little bit kind of time related anyway, but I just want to finish by saying that I think the biggest aha for me is just that this is for me as well. It's for everybody. And just that idea that it's not a role that's finished when they're 18 or they're 20 or whatever. It's a continued relationship with them, but then it's also just opened up this opportunity for me to be interested in looking like, what do I want to learn? What am I interested in? And I find it doesn't even have to be that concentrated. It's not even like me thinking, okay, what would I like to learn? It's just kind of happening all the time. So it's just changed the way that I look at things. Almost everything, maybe annoyingly so to other people, almost everything is like a learning experience now. So I think it's fundamentally changed the way, that I look at learning and life. And it's just kind of really opened up how amazing so many things in the world are. Like, there's just so many things to discover. And I guess I've always been interested in things, but I don't think I was really viewing life that way before. I was viewing it incrementally. Like, I'll do this and then I'll start this, and then I'll do this and then I'll start this, and this leads me here and this leads me there. And now it just feels like I have an image more of a web. Like, it's connected. Yes, I have, sometimes I have goals and I have ideas that I might like something to take a certain amount of time, but that can be changed as well. So for the most part, it's really, really substantially changed the way that I look at everything. It's kind of a game changer. So that's it for me. Thank you. This was really fun.
Yeah, this was a good discussion. That was fun.
Yeah. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
And this ends our conversation today. We hope you found it interesting and maybe helpful. If you'd like to connect further or see additional content, Haley can be found on the web and on Instagram at Taking a Kinder Path. I, Erin, can be found at Everlearning, and Ashley can be found on Instagram at Ashley as Mama and Storytime Shelves. We'd be very grateful if you'd share this conversation with anyone you think might appreciate it. Thank you for your time today.